What pornography does best is it delivers patriarchal ideology to men's brains via the penis, an extremely powerful delivery system. In the world of pornography, it's a world where women exist to be fucked. That's all they exist for. Women in pornography have no history, no biography, no aims, no desires, no wants, unless, of course, those wants are sexual and they completely reflect the sexual desires of men. In the world of pornography, neither the male nor the female have any humanity. Everybody is completely reduced to their sex organs, and the only goal, really, in the world of pornography is to have an orgasm, by any means necessary. In popular culture, what you have to do now to keep people interested who have been socialized in the pornographic culture is to keep ramping up the sexual level of pop culture. Otherwise, they get bored. So we think about training an entire generation of mainly men into being sexually aroused by pornography. When they go to mainstream media, unless it's got elements of that pornographic world, it's going to be very boring very quickly. It's going to look very mundane. So what you see is increasingly you'll watch a mainstream movie, it'll have some sex in it, and the sex will be set within similar codes and conventions that you find in pornography. This whole shaving of the pubic area or waxing began in pornography a number of years ago, and it was a small area was waxed, then it got more and more, till most women today in pornography really have virtually no pubic hair. You then saw it go into the women's magazines with advice about how to wax, and in fact saying that it was hygienic to wax. Now what you see is increasingly, when I speak to college students, most of them are doing this, and they say they do it for themselves. They always say, I do it because it makes me feel cleaner, it makes me feel more hygienic, it looks better. The reality is, this is a cultural phenomenon. This is not something that one day you wake up thinking about, that's a good idea, you know, I'll take all my pubic hair off. And this is how pornography seeps from the pornographic images through to pop culture into the everyday lives of women. Many of the women in the pornography industry have been sexually abused as children. Radical feminists wrote about this many years ago. We talked about how when you're sexually abused as a child, that's a great training ground for going into pornography and prostitution. That's true still very much today. However, there's something else going on now that we need to talk about. I would say that when there is a call for auditions at Vivid, the high end of the pornography industry, I would say it's a mistake to assume that every woman who goes to these auditions has been sexually abused as a child. I would say that a lot of these women now look to pornography as a way into a media career, as a way into getting your face on People magazine, as a way into making a lot of money. All of that, of course, is not true, but that's the way the pornography industry has been packaged by mainstream media. Also, many of these women come from the working class. Their options are somewhat limited. So this looks like a very viable option. That's one group. Sometimes feminists are accused of being elitist and saying, like, we know what's best for everybody. Well, I want to turn that argument around and say, how elitist is it for us to say that every generation we take a group of women, we cordon them off, and we say, your job is to fuck on camera for the enjoyment of the rest of us. We have lives, we have jobs, we have healthcare, we have all of those things. Your job is to fuck for the rest of us. That, for me, is the worst type of elitism, because the women that are chosen or cordoned off are systematically the women who are the most oppressed in this society. We all know in cultural studies that media helps to shape, define and construct identities. It helps shape, define and construct ideology, and it helps shape, define and construct the society in which we live. There's really no debate. The question is, how does it work? However, when we turn our attention to pornography, suddenly pornography has no effect. Suddenly all of this power that the media have, all of the ability of images to shape identity, suddenly it's not applicable to pornography. What I don't understand is how people who are studying media and its impact on society do not understand that that same impact that we are studying can be played out when we're looking at pornography. If advertising had no effect, do you think for 1 minute that American corporations would be spending billions of dollars on advertising? These people are not in the business of charity. They're in the business of making money. So when they're pouring billions of dollars into advertising, that's enough to know that it has an effect on some level. If we take that and we apply it to pornography, then we know that on some level, all of these images that we are bombarded with on a minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day level have to have an enormous effect on the way we perceive the reality of the world. Many of my students talk about how difficult it is when they discuss pornography with their boyfriends, and they get into fights and they're almost catatonic with frustration because their boyfriends are arguing that there's nothing wrong with pornography. And the question here is, why do men have such a hard time seeing the violence in pornography? And the answer to that is that pornography sexualizes violence against women. And when you sexualize violence, you render it invisible. What happens for many men is they simply cannot get past the sexual. The sexual arouses them, they have an erection, and they cannot look rationally at that image and see it for what it is, which is a form of violence. There's a general belief in our society that if a man watches pornography and doesn't rape or batter, then it has no effect. The reality is that there is no way you can watch or read any material and it not on some level impact on the way you construct reality. Now, we know that men read and watch a lot of pornography. The question is, what effect is it having on those men who are not raping and battering, i.e. hopefully the majority of men? What I would say is, on many levels, it is going to impact the way that you conceive of your own masculinity, the way that you think about women, the way that you develop relationships with women. There's no way that you can look at a woman in pornography, a woman who only wants sex with men in only the way that they want to have sex, who has no history, no biography, who is completely divorced or disengaged from any other part of life. There is no way you can watch that over and over again and still see women having the same level of humanity as you. People who study popular culture, pornography, violence against women often sometimes feel overwhelmed because things feel so bad at the moment. The level of violence against women is through the roof. The level of violence in society in general is dreadful. The level of pornography and the pornographic culture in the mainstream is enormous. And there is a tendency to feel overwhelmed by all of this. So the question is, what can we do? And actually, the answer is quite simple. This needs to be the next civil rights movement. This needs to be the next movement where we, the people, take control of our culture. Marx argued that to have a fair, just, and equal society, we need collective ownership of the means of production. To that, I would add that to have a fair, just, and equal society, we need collective ownership of the means of cultural production. We need to be able to tell the stories of our lives. We need to be able to tell the stories of our histories, our present, our future. Whoever said that a group of white elite males should have the right to control the entire culture, not just in this country, but now on a global level? So the answer to this is struggle. We need to struggle for a just society on an economic level and also on a cultural level, because the two are no longer separate.